Early in my career, for a lot of us, I think it's really tends to be about you. What I would tell people, younger people, is don't be the best in the world, be the best for the world. It's a very different view of yourself. And that means serve. That means you're there to serve others. You're there to help others.
Welcome to Encouraging Leaders, a podcast that exists to remind CEOs and aspiring CEOs that you do not have to lead alone. I'm Mark DeBraun, and today I'm joined by a dear friend, a great leader here in St. Louis, Tom LaMantia. He has been the CEO of Clemco Holdings for the last 7 years. He served that family as a hired gun from the outside. He's also served in organizations like that, from Watlow to others, all family owned and privately held. I love to hear his focus on culture. He is a people-centric leader, and he's just stepped out of the CEO role, did a great job of succession planning, and is now the chairman of the board, serving that same family in the same business. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
I love being able to have you on. I have gotten to know you over the last couple of years and just watched the business growth and your succession planning. And it's just a real gift to be able to sit with you and have a conversation as you give back to these young CEOs.
Well, I think we've learned together. I've learned a lot from you, and it's really been a terrific ride.
Yeah, succession is not easy. I'm going to start with the same question that I start with every episode because it's one that's near and dear to my heart. Leadership is hard, and leadership at the top is sometimes lonely. And so I want to know, when you look back through your leadership journey, when did you learn that you didn't have to lead alone?
Yeah, it took me quite a long time to figure that out. I came from a GE and a Allied Signal Honeywell background, and so that was a culture that was very much based on individuality, on meeting your commitments. It was a very difficult culture. So it took me a long time to figure out that there's two things that go together. One is that you don't have to do it alone, and there's lots of people out there that are willing to help you if you're willing to help them. So it's a thing that kind of goes together. And at the same time, I figured out that the reason I was here, the reason I was doing what I was doing, was to help serve others. Once I figured that out, then I started to be able to not go it alone and to help other people, and they helped me, and it was very collaborative, and it's been a very rewarding journey once I figured that out. Before that, there was a lot of anxiety, there was a lot of difficulty. It was really challenging because I felt I needed to do it myself.
Yeah.
And it was upon me to do it myself. But it took me probably 20 years to figure that out. I'm a slow learner.
Do you remember where you were at, what role you were in?
Yeah, so it happened over time, but where I really figured it out was at Watlow. When I was at Watlow, I was president of Watlow, and I'll just tell a quick story where two things happened at Watlow. One is that I met with the founder who wasn't part of the business, and one of the things he asked me was, I think he mentioned to me, was, Tom, do you realize that nobody in the business really likes you? I said, I didn't realize that, but it certainly had an impact on me, and I thought about it a lot. And then I had another situation where I was in China, and I had a significantly bad health scare in China, and it made me think a lot about why I was here and what I was doing, and why I was doing what I was doing. And it led me to this whole concept of, you're here to serve, you're here to help others. You're not here for yourself.
Yeah.
And once I did that, as I mentioned, all of a sudden things started to come into place, and things started to become much easier for me as I figured out that my service to others really helped me as well.
Yeah. Well, it's such a powerful lesson. Somebody in your life, a leader, saw you and said, he'd already named you. They had already named you president.
Right.
So you had been doing some things pretty darn well. But they said, basically, what got you here won't get you there. It won't keep you flourishing. And he used the words, they don't like you. But what I hear is that penetrated. It was like, okay, I need to change how I interact, how I lead.
Yeah. And one of the things that came out of all that as well is I learned that feedback is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
People don't have to give you feedback. They give you feedback because they want to help you.
Yeah.
And it may come in a format that you don't necessarily like, but it's feedback nonetheless. So what I learned through that session with George and other sessions was, I had been successful all the way through my whole career. And then George kind of talked to me about that. And it really hit me pretty hard. And it made me think about, as I said, why I was here and what I was doing. And I also learned that even though I didn't like hearing it, feedback was a gift. He gave that to me. He didn't need to do that. And he did that because he wanted me to succeed. He did that because he cared
Yeah.
about me, and he cared about the business. And so ever since then, I've really tried to think about feedback as a gift, both as in receiving it as well as giving it.
Yeah. He was courageous enough and he cared enough to give you candid feedback.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I was just talking with a friend who was under a co-leader, Bruce Farble. It was one of the first leaders that both of us had ever worked for. And he told me early on, he said, Mark, I like you. You're very smart. And if you don't change how you interact with people, you'll never make it. You'll never reach the potential that you have. And I could feel it. It penetrated deeply into my soul. It was like, holy cow. Like I needed that. Thank you. And it hurt. But I knew that it was out of a caring, loving leader. He was there to serve me and build me up, not to tear me down.
Right. It points to this issue of trust, right? If that candid feedback works, if there's some trust involved. If there's not trust involved, then it kind of just becomes politics.
Yeah.
So
or manipulation
or manipulation. And so either way, I learned a lot through a couple of those incidents, and it really helped me understand that I was here to serve. I didn't need to do this alone. In fact, you can't do it alone. You can't do it well and do it alone.
I've never found anybody doing it well and doing it alone. I've found people doing it alone, but it's painful to watch because they're alone.
Yeah.
The second idea that you brought in, which is that a challenge, it happened to be physical, but a challenge that you weren't in control of made a shift in you. You got to where you learned from a deep challenge. I mean, I just see that everywhere. So tell me about learning from challenges and how that plays into your leadership.
One of the sayings I like is, how do you purify gold? Well, fire.
Yeah.
Right? People don't like to be changed, but they will change if they believe that that picture A is stronger than picture B is stronger than picture A. Mm-hmm. And so those incidents with me painted a more compelling picture for me to move from where I was today to where I was then and to where I am today. Yeah. And so it's another lesson I've learned that again, change is difficult, but if people see a good reason to go there, they'll go there. But it has to be an I want to. It can't be an I have to. And so that's the importance of this picture.
So you've got the combination of feedback that is candid and caring, allowing people to see possibilities to change and inviting them to a change. And then you've also got challenges. I think about, first of all, I've gotten to see the culture at Clemco that you have created, and I just love the work that you've done. I'm a big fan. And I would call it a continuous improvement culture, one where people are engaged in improving the business, bettering themselves and the business. How has either feedback or allowing challenges, how have those things been built into the culture there so that they can learn and grow? How have you done that? How have you done the culture work necessary to build what you built?
The first thing is to define the culture that you want. We like to call it constructive culture. It's a kind of a helping people to self-actualize. It's a collaborative culture. It's an affirming culture, but it's also an achievement-based culture. And to me, you're always trying to create this environment that's really defined by engaged, enabled, and purposeful. So engaging people, allowing people to be engaged, to help them become the better version of themselves. It's just kind of hackneyed, but it's true. And then the last thing is, how do you provide purpose? If you think about the highest values, and I believe the two highest values that we have are love, which is one, and that love it's not a romantic love, it's willing the good of the other. So it's serving. And then the second piece is around meaning and purpose. And I believe that the more responsibility you have, the more meaning you have in your life. So we tried to build the culture around those two things, around love and around meaning. And the way we did that was really by developing what we call our values, our principles, and our behaviors. Everything we do aligns to the values and principles and behaviors that we developed that align to this concept of love and responsibility.
Well, I mean, first of all, there's not a lot of people in the world who are comfortable with the word love and leadership. I'm just acknowledging that that's what I've found, and I have become comfortable over time. It is what I use because I haven't found a better word that captures the relationship and the posture of service that leadership really entails. That I see from your leadership. When did you get comfortable using the word love in leadership?
Probably in the last 10 years, maybe. And even then, it's been a progression. I didn't start out that way, but it's a combination of learnings and as well as growing in this concept of service, as well as growing in my faith. And both of those things have led me to these two highest values. And I'm very comfortable right now talking about both of those.
Yeah, and before you were uncomfortable or
I
scared to
was
talk about them, and
uncomfortable.
now you're
Yep.
comfortable and unscared of
Well,
talking about
I kept thinking, well, there's no place for love in the working world.
it. Yeah.
Well, where else a better place to help each other than in the workplace?
Well, I think that because I want to take you back to your comments, which is that you had to define the values, the behaviors, and the principles. Why does it require defining that instead of just say love each other? Because that could be all you say. So why did it require values, principles, and behaviors to be able to build what you wanted to build?
Earlier in my career, we just defined the values. Everybody kind of defines that, and it's kind of a standard, a framework for individual choices and action. So you have to develop what that framework is for people to know how to live within the world that they're in. But what I found is the values weren't enough, and so we then decided to, and this was at Lala where we did it first, but we also did it at Clemco where we defined our behaviors, and that's pretty straightforward. It's how one conducts themselves. And then the third thing was these principles. They're a fundamental truth or proposition that really serves as a foundation for decision making. And once you have all three of those, you now have a nice set of guidelines or a box that people know this is how I'm supposed to behave, this is how I'm supposed to act, this is how I'm supposed to be able to make decisions. Without that, people will come to their own conclusions on what they should do and how they should do it. And what ends up happening is you end up having a lot of different things that are going on in your business that aren't aligned.
Yeah.
And that alignment is really what moves that organization forward because we're all on the same page. We're all going together. We all understand the rules of the game. That's what I found to be very powerful. Probably the most powerful thing in the business.
Yeah, I mean, if you're aiming for engagement, I mean, the numbers are staggering. When you look across the US, engagement levels are sub 30% on average. And at Clemco, you had high engagement. And I could witness, I could feel it when I walk into the plant. And the alignment that you're describing, which is taking the time, making the actual intention to take this concept of love and purpose, and then write down what the values are, the principles, and the behaviors so that people can feel confident that they know how to act and how to behave whenever they're inside of that culture.
That's right. And as time goes along, you affirm those behaviors, you affirm those principles, you're always affirming. To me, affirmation is much more powerful than trying to tell people what they're not doing right. Now, if people get out of line or they fail to follow the behaviors, the values, principles, behaviors, which we do every day, right? They're difficult, they're challenging.
Yeah.
So we always need to be brought back in to alignment. And that's where leadership comes in, where we have this box, somebody moves outside the box, they need to be brought back in. They need to understand why. We need to understand why that misalignment occurred and then get them back in alignment.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love it. It's the reason behind the work of values, behaviors, and principles. It's you're after alignment and engagement. You're after growth of the overall organization and every individual. And without them, it's chaotic and unaligned, and people get disengaged because they don't know which way to go, and so they just wait.
You can't really motivate anybody. All you can do is create the environment because motivation is intrinsic. And so those values and principles and behaviors are there to try and help create an environment where people feel purpose. They feel engaged. They feel like they're part of something bigger. And at Clemco, and at Watlow as well. It's worked very well. And the thing I love about it is people want to be there. They want to be there. They're not there for the paycheck. They're there because they're part of something bigger. They're part of something special. And as a result, for example, we have very little turnover at Clemco because the culture is strong. The culture is aligned.
Yeah, so aligned culture with values, principles, and behaviors allowed for good engagement of individuals. They're bringing themselves, they know they're there for purpose, and then they don't leave.
Right, right.
And so that can allow you to focus on longer term strategies and growth. Congratulations on the work there. So you are an industrial manufacturer out there. You're serving heavy industry. It's not the sexy stuff. It's not purpose driven by its nature. Like it's not saving the world in healthcare or something like that. How did you bring purpose and meaning into the industrial space?
Yeah, a couple different ways. One is that the work we do out there is important work. And it's important for two reasons. One is, we make compressed air blast systems. The picture we tried to paint was that the work that we do, we blast, if you look at what we do, bridges, for example, need to be, what's the main failure on a bridge? Well, it's corrosion. What is the work that we do? The work we do prevents corrosion. If you look at that, many years ago, there was a failure on a blade on a Southwest engine jet. And what happened there? Well, it was a stress riser so that blade wasn't shot peened correctly and it failed and people died. So I try to talk about the work we do is important work, right? To the world.
Yeah.
And the second thing is we are all in this together. Everybody who's a stakeholder in Clemco depends on each other, right? Whether they be employees and their families, whether they be suppliers and their families, whether they be customers and their families, distributors, whoever it is, we're all dependent on each other. And the work that we do helps people downstream, and our suppliers help us from upstream. So we all have to work together. And if we don't work together in the system doesn't work. And so there's purpose there, right? There's purpose because we affect so many people's lives in the work that we do.
Yeah, so I love it. Both aims there. You are looking for the purpose behind the actual business on what you're actually serving in the world, and you do serve an important function. You stop critical failures from happening.
That's right.
And you don't have to see that as a leader. You could just ignore that, but you have to be able to look for those stories and connect those. So every CEO that's listening, whether you're serving ice cream or whether you're building industrial manufacturing equipment or whatever you're doing, you have a responsibility to connect to the purpose that you're actually serving. And then the second one is this collective purpose of we all rely on each other. And if one of us fails, we all fail. We have to succeed together. And so we need each other. And so you're building a tribe of people that are serving each other in that. So
yeah, you said it a lot better than I did.
no, I think it's easier to summarize a great idea and a great point than it is to come up with the great point and to lead it. So I think about sometimes in leadership, all the things just fire on all the cylinders. Like they're just like come together and we knock it out of the park. Think back on your tenure either at Clemco or before, when it was just all humming and it just knocked it out of the park. And I'd love to hear that and I'd love to help celebrate it with you. What was a time when you look back on your leadership and it just all worked?
I don't know if I can talk about what all worked. I do have a story that I would like to tell, though, that I think really reflects the values, principles, and behaviors. This was actually recently where we had an individual that we had hired on a temporary basis out in the shop. Somebody mentioned to the plant manager that the guy had a tattoo on his neck, and that tattoo could be, some people could look at that too and be offended by it. So he essentially went down to that guy and got the supervisor and asked him about the tattoo and said, yeah, that's what this tattoo is. And he had fired him. The next day, he was really wondering whether that was the right decision. He went to the VP of Ops at the time, and in his hand, he had our picture of our values and principles and behaviors. And with tears in his eyes, he said to the VP, I wonder if I did the right thing. Last night, I'm sitting there holding and looking at my values and principles and behaviors, and I made this decision without really considering this. And I'm wondering if I made the right decision. So the VP of Ops actually came to see me, and I said, well, what would the values, principles, and behaviors tell you? Well, they would tell me that I should seek to understand.
Mm-hmm.
I should better understand who this guy is, why he is what he is, who he's all about, and not to make quick decisions
Mm-hmm.
and have some empathy. So they went back, and the next day, the plant manager called him, brought him back in. They had a really good long discussion. Turns out that tattoo was like 30 years ago, and he regretted it ever since. Brought him back. We brought him back. And he's been there ever since, and he's been a really good employee. That's what I call is working, right? The values and principles, behaviors, we're getting it, we're understanding it, we're using it. And when I hear stories like that, those are the things that make me say, we are changing the world.
Yeah.
Right? We're changing the world when we're doing something like that, because most people would not, most organizations would not. That's when I started to believe that we really did understand this and we really got it.
It's such a powerful story. The idea that someone would use the values to assess their own behavior and see if they were aligned with it, be willing to look like a fool or like they made a mistake and say, hey, listen, I think I might have missed this. Can I get some coaching on that from above? And then they would feel safe enough to come to you and do that work together, that they didn't do it alone. Back to the question of, can we lead alone?
Yeah.
There's a quote by Maya Angelou that says, courage is the most important of all values and virtues. And the reason is because trying to do any of the other values consistently will require courage. And that's what I hear in that story, is just massive courage from every level to say, hey, listen, I'm scared. I don't know. I might have made a mistake here. How do we do this? And the courage to hold the values.
Which courage, which happens to be one of our aspirational values. We've broken them up into core and aspirational. And we have courage as aspirational because it's hard.
It is
Right?
hard.
It's difficult. It's both give feedback and receive feedback and feedback up, feedback down. It's all hard. It's all difficult.
All
And that's why it's an aspirational value for us. But our plant manager, Robert O'Daniel, really showed courage in that
He
situation.
really showed that aspirational value. And I can feel it. It gives me goosebumps to think about the courage. And when you have courage like that, that will grow and impact the world. And that's what you're seeing. And it gives purpose to meaning to your work as a leader, as you're writing down the values and helping reinforce those.
Yeah. And as we all know, we're watched every day as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And when he made that decision, and people knew he made that decision,
Right.
And then to reverse that decision, they knew why he reversed that decision. All of a sudden, it makes other people start to think about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and to look at our values, principles, behaviors, and understand how to apply those within our business. Very powerful.
Very powerful. Okay, Tom, last question. Basically, you're stepping into this president's role. I think about that time, or you can even go further back than that, and you want to give them a gift of feedback or encouragement. What would you tell that younger version of yourself? What do they need to hear from a wise old leader now, ready to pay back to that younger self?
Early in my career, for a lot of us, I think it's really tends to be about you. What I would tell people, younger people, is don't be the best in the world, be the best for the world. It's a very different view of yourself.
Say it again.
Don't be the best in the world, be the best for the world.
Wow. Don't be the best in the world, be the best for the world.
And that means serve. That means you're there to serve others. You're there to help others. If I could do one thing when I went back into my career, that's the thing I would have done differently.
You would have done it earlier.
Done much, much earlier. Now, would I have survived in that environment years ago? Maybe not, but it would have been better for me. It would have been better for the people that I was working with. The second thing I would say is you can't change others. You can only change yourself. And when you change yourself, others will come along with you.
Yeah.
If you're there to serve others. So those are the two things that I would give advice to from my learnings over my career.
It's such valuable feedback and wisdom. Going back to these young CEOs, if you're a young and aspiring CEO, you've heard Tom's message. Don't be the best in the world, be the best for the world. And then you can't change others, but you can change yourself and master yourself and learn to grow and improve yourself and grow as a leader into the leader you were created to be. Such a powerful message. Thank you everybody for listening. And Tom, thank you so much for pouring into these future leaders of the world. Really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.